Well, welcome to Garden Party
Yeah.
at the Remember Me Rose Garden.
Yeah, this is really a special day.
Very special day.
Yep. It's meaningful.
John, you've put a lot of work into this beautiful garden here. Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, thank you. I've been up here and there's been a ton of people.
Yeah.
You know, primarily it was an all-volunteer effort. Well, last June of 2021, my friend Bill Sink called me, knowing that I'm a fanatical gardener, and he said, we need a landscaper up in Somerset area for this rose garden. And I'm thinking that there's a rose garden that just needs some love and attention.
Right?
Yeah. No. So I came up, and to make a long story short, we were able to connect with a friend of mine up here who had a son that had just started an excavating business. And away we went. I think my first visit was June 21st of 2021.
Wow.
And together with an army of volunteers, we walked off this site on September 10th, 2021. And of course came back the next day for the 20th anniversary. But it was a tremendous effort. So many volunteers, so many donations, so much love, so many blessings.
Yeah.
One of the greatest blessings was that I think it was the second day of planting perennials, it had to be 95 degrees. And I was so worried these plants weren't going to make it at all.
Yeah.
And it was sunny and hot. And we had just finished probably like our 300th perennial. And the skies opened up as we were leaving.
What a blessing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my
Yeah.
gosh.
It just was a pretty amazing day. So we're going to meet some people today. Clay Mankemeyer, who really was a visionary behind this.
Yeah.
Bill Sink. We're going to meet some volunteers. So it's a this is a special place.
It is. It feels very holy and sacred here.
It is. And you just saw right before we started filming, a woman arrived and she was in tears.
Yeah.
We see that all the time. It's somber, it's powerful, it's sacred, and it's also beautiful. It's a beautiful tribute to the people whose names are carved on these stones around the fountain.
It was very moving. I mean, just to walk around and see everybody's names, and it makes you really realize that people were on that plane.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
And so many people's lives were changed from that experience. I mean, that day was so horrific in our history to begin with, but to have something so beautiful to come and, reflect on their lives and how they affected the world, and to be surrounded by, all of these gorgeous roses, and then the perennial gardens on the four
And it's only a
corners.
year old. It's not even a year old. It's like 10 months.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just so pleased. We primarily used 5 different perennials. We did some daylilies, Russian sage, coneflower, gay feather, stelladora, which is a daylily, and phlox.
Yeah.
So, we just stuck with those, and we're going to show some footage. I am thrilled with the condition.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
We do not have an irrigation system here. It's been a hot summer.
Very hot,
right?
very dry.
So very dry. It's only going to get better. I think it's important to point out the National Memorial, which is only a quarter mile down the road west of here on Route 30, is an incredible, powerful, also very sobering. That's the actual crash site.
Right.
But the families of the victims who are so overwhelmed and moved by that national park, they wanted to have more of a living tribute.
Right.
Hence the garden. At the Federal National Memorial, it's marble and concrete and stone, and it's really powerful in so many ways. This is a very different type of architectural approach. All the stones that you see are from this property. They came out of the woods.
Wow.
The Julienne roses, which were selected specifically for this site because they're hardy and that they bloom consistently throughout the summer, to keep it a living tribute. Also, we're going to show you a little bit later, there's a cross, which symbolizes faith. Of course, our Christian faith, but there weren't all Christians on that plane. There were There were Jewish people on that plane. There were Buddhists on that plane. But the families of all the victims supported putting the cross on this site. And that cross was the first, it was the first tribute. Like, I think Clay's going to talk about it, 1 or 2 days after the crash. The locals put that on the site. And then once the federal government came in, it had to be removed because of, federal regulations.
Right.
So that's a big element that's in this rose garden also that's very meaningful.
The power of faith.
Power of faith. And it was a big part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Those people knew exactly what was about to happen. And we have all the voice messages and testimony of different people to prove it. They knew exactly. They were the first in the war on terror.
That's true.
That plane was 10 minutes away from the nation's capital. Because this is a main corridor. I've learned so much working up here. And we're going to learn a lot more when Clay and others are our guests today.
Yeah.
But this is a main corridor that goes straight down to Washington, D.C.
It's such a gift to be here today.
Well, we're glad you're here. I have to tell you, all last summer I was here 2 or 3 days a week with an army of volunteers. Yeah. September 10th we wrap up. I leave to go home, and the next day I came up for September 11th with Michelle, with my bride. And as I'm walking up, I started sobbing, and it hit me.
Yeah.
It hits you.
Yeah.
And working it, it wasn't that emotion. It was like, we've got to get this done, and we're going to sweat, and we're going to dig, and we're going to get dirty, and we're going to get this done. But to come up here and to see it finished, it just, it's still emotional.
Yeah.
It's still emotional.
And can't you just picture this in 5 or 10 years when all these flowers are, those roses are quadrupled in size, and the perennials fill in, and it's just one big mess of color and beauty.
And something else that is happening this year, we are planting a wildflower garden, which is going to be the size of about 2 football fields. We're actually we're going to seed today. Now this property is 15 acres.
Okay.
So it's important for folks to understand that this property was donated to the families of the 40 heroes. So it is technically owned by the families. Then the families who now own this property, they deeded it to the Remember Me Rose Garden 501c3 organization. And when we talk to Clay, he'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
So this 15-acre property, there's a walking trail called Ryan's Trail, and we're going to have Bill Sink tell a little more about that. We're building an amphitheater for music events, symphony events specifically. So there's a lot to come forward.
Right.
A visitor center. Today's a big day. Our tool shed was delivered.
I saw it. Looks
See
beautiful.
It down there? So
looks like they're having a party down there.
Yeah, those are the guys that are trying to avoid me.
Well,
because
you will be the slave driver.
Yeah, they'll all get assignments, and they run when I pull up.
Right.
But no, they're incredible.
Yeah.
We're going to meet some of the volunteers.
Good. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, me too. It's a great day.
Shadow of the moon. Don't you know I was born in the shadow of the moon?
Beth,
John,
say hello to my friend Bill Sink.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. It's so good to have you with us today.
It's nice to be here.
Yes. Tell me a little bit about your involvement here at the Rose Garden.
I am on the board of directors, as is my good friend, Mr. John Vento, here beside me. And it's an all-volunteer board, and we are actively creating something, beauty from ashes, as we like to say, that honors the heroes of Flight 93.
It sure is beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know you and John have done a lot of work together.
We have. We
Yeah.
certainly have.
I guess you could say, and a lot of other great volunteers.
Yeah.
But when Bill called me a year ago and we came up, and he can tell you the story better than me, I expected that there was a rose garden here, as I mentioned earlier
Yeah.
in our show. But there wasn't a rose garden here.
It was a nice field.
He misled me.
My understanding is you guys did a ton of work in like a 2-month span of time.
Very short period
Right?
of time.
So you got called in because you needed a landscaper, correct?
Yes, we decided that we were going to try to finish the rose garden, at least phase 1, as we're calling it, the rose garden, in time for the 20th anniversary of 9/11
Okay.
in 2021. So I called commercial landscapers in the area. They were too busy to help. So I called the one guy I knew who knew something about landscaping,
Wait,
Mr.
who?
John Vento,
Him?
this guy right here.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Just a little bit,
I
right? He
tell
knows a little
people that his home is Phipps Conservatory North, and it is. And he's got landscaping in his past, and I thought maybe he'd know somebody. He did. Fortunately, her son had started a landscaping and excavating business the day prior to the phone call from John. We met with him 2 days later, young 18-year-old guy by the
Yep.
name of Cameron Beener.
Tremendous worker.
And Cameron swung into action 3 days later.
Yeah.
On a Monday
Away we
morning, he
went.
started, and in 2 months' time, this is what resulted.
Between Cameron and his guy Titan, I love that
Yep.
name.
Titan.
His buddy, who's another high school student, Titan,
Yeah.
and a ton of
Who would
volunteers.
pick up the rocks by
Oh, yeah.
himself and
This guy
move
was
them
a
into
beast.
position. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, between Titan and Cameron and a bunch of volunteers, and
Yep.
a little over 2 months. Here we are.
Here we are. Yeah.
And I
Yep.
think
I'm sorry.
I think you have a trail that you can tell us a little bit about, right?
We do.
Ryan's Trail?
It's called Ryan's Trail. It's named for my son, Ryan.
Okay.
So Ryan had a big heart for a lot of things and a lot of people, but he really felt for the heroes of Flight 93 and the families that were left behind. And he wanted to do something to honor their memory. So after a call to the National Memorial, which was sort of unsuccessful, they said only government contractors can come on site. Ryan wanted to do his Eagle Scout project, and they suggested, why don't you go to the Remember Me Rose Garden? They're putting in the new Rose Garden. Maybe they can use your help. So, long story short, Ryan raised $14,000 to purchase teakwood benches and platform materials to build platforms to mount the benches. And they now encircle the Rose Garden. It's about a half-mile trail that goes all the way around.
Okay.
And it's named in Ryan's honor and in Ryan's memory. Ryan passed away in 2017 from a brain tumor. But his legacy of loving others and caring about other people lives on in part through this Rose Garden.
Yeah.
And a lot of other places.
And a lot of other places.
And a lot of other beautiful situations, for
Yep.
sure.
He left a great legacy
He
behind.
sure did. Now, we're obviously the garden party. So,
Yes, yeah,
on a little
I like
bit of a lighter note, we want these beautiful roses, and of course, we have the perennial gardens. And this past April, we hosted a world-renowned rosarian, Steve Scaniello.
Scaniello.
Yep. And he came up for a master garden class.
Right?
And I love the story you told because you met him here early that Saturday morning. So could you share, as you came up to meet him for the first time?
Sure.
He was standing, I think, kind of right where we are now.
About
could you
where we
just
are now.
share that
Sure.
story?
Well, Stephen, maybe if I could give just a second of background on
Oh,
Stephen.
of course.
So we met Stephen through the company that donated all these beautiful rose bushes, Certified Roses,
Yep.
in collaboration with one of their nurseries, Hopewell Nursery from New Jersey. And Certified Roses, when we were asking about roses and rose care, referred us to Stephen Scaniello. He is the curator of the Peggy Rockefeller Rose Garden at the New York Botanical Garden, and very well-known lecturer, author, and he's agreed to be an advisor to our board of directors. So
Wow.
we invited him here to see the garden actually for the first time
Yeah.
and to teach a rose care master class. And he spent a full day with us. People absolutely loved it. He's a very smart guy, very nice guy, very sociable guy.
Yep.
And he did a terrific job just entertaining and
Oh, yeah, he's wonderful.
and teaching everybody about rose care. So I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us are. I'm not roses. I don't know the first thing.
Clay
about
and Mary Alice, maybe the
They've
closest
learned. They
thing-
know a little more. Yeah.
They know quite a bit more than me, for sure. And I know a little bit now.
And a lot more than me too.
Now that Stephen's been here.
Yeah.
So what was the main thing that you learned from him about rose care?
The main thing I learned was you have to be able to pile up the mulch around the base of the plant.
We'll do that in
about
October,
8 inches
November.
in October and November
Yeah.
to protect it from the cold. And literally everything that's above the mulch line turns black, and everything below it is green. So then when you pull back the mulch in the spring, you cut it all the way back to where the black part of the dead part is.
We treat with Epsom salts, right? That was
Epsom salts? Yep.
Lots of
I've
Epsom
never heard of
salts.
that before.
So tell me
Yeah.
about the Epsom salts. I don't know about this.
Nor do I.
Nor do we.
Oh.
Stephen does though.
I just know that
I
I,
mean-
cleaned Walgreens out of 39 bags of
And look at these roses.
I know they're stunning.
I mean, that
So
was a surprise.
Did you sprinkle the Epsom salts around the
Around the
roses?
base.
Around the
Okay.
base of each plant.
When? In the fall?
In the spring.
In
In
the
the
spring. Okay.
So in the fall, we mounded them up with mulch. And then they went through the winter, and I was worried. Remember, I'm like,
Yeah.
these damn things they're gone.
Yeah.
I was very wrong, and thankfully, because I don't know a thing about roses. And then Stephen came in the spring and said, no, we're cool. And we pulled back all the mulch, and we pruned them all back down. We did Epsom salt, and there was a little bit of fertilizer
fertilizer too. Yeah. Rose fertilizer.
rose fertilizer, and then there's been some insecticide involved. And Bill communicates with Stephen each step of the way. But I think the most important thing was Stephen standing here. That's what I want to get to. And you greeted him and how emotional he was when he came here. That's the story I want you to share.
He beat me to the rose garden by about 10 minutes. So when I walked up, he was the first person here. And it was before he taught his class. And I walked up and he was just standing here. And I said, I looked at him and he sort of half looked at me and kind of, we'd had dinner with him the night before. So I'd already met him. And he was looking into the fountain. I said, hey, everything okay? And he turned and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, I didn't expect this to be so emotional. He said, this is just beautiful. What you guys have done here is just beautiful.
It's a sacred spot.
Yeah.
It really is.
Tears in his eyes.
And on a much more serious note, we understand through research that Beth and I have done that you are a certified scuba diver. And there's been sightings of you in that pond.
Yeah.
See, this is why you don't share questions in advance. Is that?
Well, no, Beth actually
I
looked it
heard.
up. She
Did
heard.
you?
Oh, yeah,
looked
it's
it- I
well known.
Googled
Yeah.
it.
Well,
Scuba diver, Google.
Yeah, I did. I said,
So I inherited from my father a set of waders. I don't fish, but my dad did. So
Yeah.
I'm the volunteer that gets to walk into the fountain
Yeah.
and either take it out in the winter or put it back in the spring.
And my favorite thing is after you did all that work and the fountain looked beautiful, somebody, and it wasn't me, said, Bill, the fountain is 4 inches off center. Right?
so you had to move
So I went back in.
I was like,
Yes.
what the hell are
Yeah.
they talking
Nice.
about?
Yes.
So he has to climb back in.
And there were a couple of people, names that won't be mentioned,
Okay.
who were
We will not
cheering
mention.
for me to slip underneath the water, but it didn't happen.
Bill, it's off center by 4 inches. Oh, okay.
How deep is it? in
It's
the
not too
middle?
deep.
No, okay.
3.5 feet, maybe.
3.5.
Yeah.
That was a real highlight of our spring activities,
Yes.
Mr. Scuba.
But
Yes.
it's just stunning. I mean,
Thank you.
really.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Are there any lights or anything in there? For
There
the
are
Oh,
lights.
yeah.
It's
Oh,
up
yeah.
lit during the evening.
It's lit during the evening. Listen, without this guy and Clay Mankemeyer, there's no Rose Garden. Okay, the rest of us volunteers, we work hard, we pitched in, but these guys are the driving force. So I'm excited for you to meet Clay. Let's get Clay in here, and I think you're going to enjoy that.
I have just one quick
Yeah.
question for you. You talked about Julie Andrews already, I'm sure.
We didn't talk about Julie Andrews.
Can we talk about Julie Andrews for a minute?
Well,
Yes,
sure we
let's
can.
talk about Julie Andrews.
So
Is she a rapper? Is she a current artist?
I thought maybe you'd heard
Marcello
of her before.
knows her.
Marcello, do you know her?
Do you know Julie Andrews? You do? Okay. I got a bug in my hair. Tell us about
And
Julie.
you may be singing with her one day if we're
Yeah.
fortunate
I'll tell you what, I'll
enough
carry
to
her
get here.
microphone for her. But tell us about Julie Andrews.
So the rose that we have planted here in the rose garden is the Julie Andrews rose, and it was named for her. She was able to pick among a variety of roses that were grown, cultivated by certified roses, and whichever one she picked was going to be named the Julie Andrews rose. So
Wow, that's interesting.
that's what we have here in the garden. She is delighted
Yep, she's,
with the pictures that have been sent to her. We've sent her T-shirts and shirts and everything for
Yeah.
Remember Me Rose Garden. And jokingly, a couple of her friends said they were going to kidnap her and drive her here in the middle of the night. But on a more serious note, we'd definitely love to get her.
we're working on getting her here. Maybe we could get a picture with her with our Rose Garden shirts.
That's a great idea.
Let's work on
I
that.
like
By the
that.
way, you look pretty handsome in your shirt.
You look pretty darn good too.
I do.
know.
I know.
Yeah, yes,
Both
we
of us do.
I know.
I
Beth
know.
probably mentioned that earlier, so you've heard it before.
I need
Beth,
a
we need
shirt.
to
I
get
know.
you a shirt.
We goofed
Everybody
up,
has
Beth.
a shirt.
I
but
know.
me.
We're going to get you one, and
Yes.
we were hoping to get you one. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we got to get Julie Andrews here.
That would be
And
nice.
Beth could give her singing lessons.
Oh, Beth, would
I would
you?
just love that.
Oh,
That would be quite an honor.
and she would love it too.
I'm
she
sure
would.
she would. Yeah.
She would.
What a great idea. What a great idea.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for
Thank you.
including me. Really.
Yeah. Oh.
It's an honor.
Bill.
It's been an honor, John.
Yep.
Thank you, Beth. Very nice
Thank you
meeting
for
you.
coming.
Thanks.
Let's get Clay.
Need a little love in this world today. We need a little.
So, Beth, this is the heart and soul of the Remember Me Rose Garden, Mr. Clay Mankemeyer.
Hi, Clay. I'm Beth.
Clay, Beth Clausen.
Good to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Wonderful to meet you. We're so thrilled to be here. This is such an honor to share this space with you today.
Well, the honor's ours.
Tell us a little bit more about your involvement here.
Well, the garden was birthed, of course, on 9/11/2001 at the crash of Flight 93. My home is in Shanksville Borough, and the borough is located only a few miles from the actual crash site. As a matter of fact, they say if the plane had remained airborne only about 3 more seconds, our town would have likely been the target, and our little school K through 12 and my house as well. So I responded to the scene as soon as I had heard there'd been a crash. I had left my house probably just a short while before the crash took place, and I got word through a neighbor that the plane had gone down near Shanksville. So I rushed back in time to see a plume of smoke that seemed like it went into the clear blue sky forever. I went for my son, who had an off-road vehicle, thinking we could join in the search and rescue, and arrived at the scene only to see utter devastation and feel utter frustration because there was nothing anybody could do at that point but secure the scene and wait for the investigators to arrive.
I can't even imagine what horror that was for you.
It was more anger and frustration than anything.
Yeah.
As a retired state policeman, I was used to at scenes of devastation just springing into action automatically and doing what needed to be done there. There was nothing you could do. And as the story unfolded about the loss of life, the needless, senseless loss of life that took place on that plane, and then the stories about the heroism that took place began to inspire me. And instead of frustration and anger, I began to pray about and think about what I could do in return. And what you see here grew out of that frustration and the desire for the families of Flight 93 who began to gather in Shanksville. We formed a group to begin talking about accommodating the thousands, even tens of thousands of visitors that descended on that crash site.
Yeah.
Well-wishers that also heard the story and felt they just had to do something, bring a token of their appreciation to that remotely located field with one farmer's dirt access road to it.
Yeah.
And it created a great deal of chaos at that point. Then I began to see a picture of something beautiful that could come out of it, especially as we formed our task force and began to get input. I joined the design solicitation committee to solicit for ideas about a design for the park and begin to bring that all to fruition. We ran into some roadblocks, though. The stewardesses wanted to honor their fallen comrades, of course, and they had this idea of a rose garden. It also just happened, which I now know was no coincidence, that rose growers began to descend on our committee as well. One gentleman from New York City was a gardener that always bought a bouquet of these beautiful big roses and passed them out to the families and that were in attendance. Another rosarian from Oregon came and, with her ideas, and the stewardesses and the crew, the friends of the crew that died, fellow stewardess and stewards, really latched hold of that vision along with myself. I'm a rose lover. My mother always grew roses at the foot of the steps in our old farmhouse, and I loved seeing them come into bloom and smelling the fragrance. So I thought that was a wonderful idea. The Park Service, not so much. They said that would be prohibitive. That we could not include that because of the maintenance that would be required, the use of the chemicals that would be necessary to keep it going would have to have special approval, and with the environmentalists that wouldn't work out. Right. And so they nixed the entire idea. However, my wife, who had caught on to this vision as well with me, shared with the head of the family association. They formed their own group to be part of the committee as well, and they heard about them through her of what we would like to do and the frustration and the roadblocks that have come up with the Park Service. And so Patrick White, who was chairing the committee at the time, called me and said he wanted to meet me somewhere out near the crash site. And I said, how about that cell tower on the top of the hill? Yeah. It'd be a good point where we both could find easily, because they didn't know their way around that well. And we met just a few hundred feet from here under this giant cell tower. And he said, we heard about your idea for a rose garden. We like it. What do you need? And I said, about 15 acres. Yeah. He didn't flinch at all. And he said, well, where do you need it? And I turned around and pointed to this spot. I said, right here. Yeah. And it turned out that the families were in the process of buying up a buffer zone around the park itself so that they could control commercial development, so it wouldn't become overly commercialized. They didn't want McDonald's arches on top of the hill over top of the crash site here. Not that there's anything wrong with McDonald's, but
to maintain some sacred sense of space here.
Yes, that wouldn't infringe on the memorial itself, and so I told him this is what we needed. I didn't realize what I was biting off here altogether, because this was an overgrown whitethorn woods. It was being used as an illegal trash dump. Truckers and everybody was discarding their tires up here and trash, and it was quite a mess. And it wasn't until we started excavating.
When was that?
That was about it took about 2 years for all this to come together after the crash.
What year? So 2002,
about 2003, early 2003, going into 2004. And so the neat thing was that they had started their own fund, their own resources and friends and well-wishers to buy up this buffer zone. So no federal monies had gone into the park. So when it came time to construct the permanent memorial and tear down the temporary memorial over there, another problem arose. Became a very serious problem for me and a lot of people that were volunteering over there. The cross that you see on the hill behind me, which actually was the first tribute placed at the crash site. A church from Somerset heard about the families being bussed in to an overlook just above the crash site itself to await word from the coroner confirming the death of their loved ones. And the pastor thought how excruciating a time that was going to be for them. He got the idea of having the men get some lumber and construct this life-size cross, and we bought it out and placed it in the field in front of where this family took up their vigil. And later on it was moved over to the center of the open field where the crash site is, and a temporary memorial spontaneously formed around this cross. As well-wishers came from all over the country. Matter of fact, all over the world. I talked to people from many different countries out there, and many had tokens that they wanted to leave, a token of their appreciation. And so we had to construct a fence, a big chain link fence, to fasten that stuff on, because no sooner would they put it someplace and winds would come across that blow across this mountaintop and scatter it in the fields. And then the state came in and put up a flag. The federal flag was erected, and a beautiful temporary memorial formed. Well, when the permanent memorial was constructed, they began deconstructing that, cataloging everything carefully, putting what they wanted to and could on display in the education center there and the visitors center. But one thing was missing. The cross disappeared. It wasn't cataloged. It wasn't there. So I approached the head of the Park Service there and asked him what happened to the cross. And he said, it's gone and it's not coming back. And I said, well, if it's gone and not coming back, I'm gone and I'm not coming back. And I think a lot of your volunteers, there were over 40 of us at the time, are probably going to not come back either. And so we came to an impasse. And then he said, wait a minute. He said, aren't you part of that group that want to put a rose garden in? And I said, yes. And he said, come look at this map. And he showed me the legislative boundaries to the rose garden and the crash, or not the rose garden at the time, but the crash site. And it included this property, but only as a buffer zone and not as federal property. It was legislatively considered part of the park, but not legally part of the park. So no federal funds had gone into it. He explained that was their reason for discarding the crosses, because every place where they put in a park or for some reason had erected or wanted to erect a religious symbol, especially a Christian cross, it would be challenged in court. So they would be facing lawsuits, and they were losing every lawsuit, having to pay not only their expenses, but the expenses of the people that had sued them as well, and they weren't willing to go through that. So we, with this, no federal funds were put into this property. The families are the ones that bought it and had it surveyed, and were able to turn this over to us. And I got my 15 acres, and I got them at a relatively level ground, which is at a premium. If you noticed around these beautiful rolling
there's
mountains,
a lot of hills.
There isn't much of it.
And
so
you were able to get the cross.
as we cleared things out, a special plot was cleared, and stones, just giant boulders put to elevate it. It now has the highest point, not only in the rose garden, but the highest point on the mountain and over the national park as well.
Wow.
So I think it's a fitting tribute, fitting memorial. This earth, these rocks, these beautiful boulders you see here, I had the dozers from surrounding strip mine operations clear off this field, and we tried to discard them by pushing them back in the woods. And then when it came time to try to come up with funds to build a formal garden in here, they just weren't there and weren't going to be available. We had looked at nearly $1 million worth of expenditures to do anything. My son had just purchased a little earth mover backhoe with a blade on it, And I came out with it, and I don't know what actually gave me the idea. I credit the Lord for that, to just start rolling these boulders out here and place them in this circle and make it big enough that the stewardess could get their wishes to be able to see that as they passed over and be able to point out this spot on the ground where their comrades fell. Defending our country. It wasn't enough, though, when I formed the circle from about 30 or 40,000 feet. It still knew it wouldn't stick out well enough. I'm a former pilot myself. And so I remembered, it came to mind about these beautiful compass rose designs that you see on the old-time maps, that they would put the north, south, east, and west points, and then put like rose designs and flower it all up. That came to mind. And I went ahead and put the 93-foot long spikes on, pointing north, south, east, and west, with the south point pointing over this ridge, just about where the crash site is. From the air, then it would be very easy to pick out and discern the site. The water, I thought, would be a nice backdrop to that as well with this pond. So we made it 40 feet for the 40 heroes here, with a tremendous amount of symbolism. And the story was that this was never going to work. The local gardeners around here said, "You're crazy, you can't grow roses in this climate." And the first couple attempts proved them right. They froze out, the diseases, the animals, just wreaked havoc with us. So it's been a labor of love here now for over 15 years, trying to come to something that worked. I found people like John here and Bill and others who had some expertise in that area, also caught on to this vision of having this beautiful tribute, and we didn't give up. We tried different plants and came up with the idea of putting these perennials out here, a variety of perennials in the spikes, and we found out about the Julie Andrews rose. Little did I know Mary Poppins would enter the scene here with this dilemma. And it turned out that rose had been a newly hybridized rose that had won an international competition and had been named the Rose of the Century for its hardiness, its disease resistance. And so, against the advice of the gardeners around here, we accepted the generous offer of a truckload of those. What was it, about 450 of them, I think, roses initially.
Roses? Oh my
Well,
gosh.
there's roses in the front, there's roses up at the cross,
Yeah.
there's all these roses, there's about 450 that we planted.
Wow.
Yeah.
And those roses that the rose growers, gardeners around here said couldn't survive, we had 100% success rate.
Yeah.
Didn't lose a single rose
Yeah.
over the a very harsh winter that we had the first winter.
So
And
it's,
this that you see around us, this lovely, inspiring display of beauty and fragrance is the result.
Clay, thank you so much, buddy.
You're
Thanks
certainly
for including
welcome.
me and for having this vision of making this all happen.
And
for so many
you've been a
people.
very important part of that vision.
Well-
Your ability to inspire volunteers and your backing was just invaluable.
Thank
So
you. Thank
God
you so
bless you
much.
for it.
Thank
We
you.
Young
appreciate
lady,
it.
thank you.
Beth, it's been quite a day.
It sure
Hasn't
has.
it?
What an experience. I've learned so much today.
Yeah, and it's really
Really.
moving. So, all right, we're going to sign off as the wind kicks in. We're going to say goodbye and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for being here.